Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of our SILS Connection. Today we are having a panel on consulting. My name is Lori Haight. I serve as the Director of Career Services at SILS, and I'd like to turn it over now to our three panelists so they can introduce themselves and what type of consulting they're doing, and then we'll start with our questions. Please feel free to ask questions throughout, but we will have time at the end to ask your questions if you'd like to drop it into the chat. So Rob, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Subrat Jam. I graduated from SILS with a bachelor's in 2020. And I'm currently working at Clarkston Consulting here based in Raleigh-Durham area. And I'm a technical consultant.
Great. Jimin, can you go next for us, please?
Hello, everyone. So I'm a recent graduate. Some of you I've actually had class with, so it's really exciting to see you guys on this call. I work at AARP Services, and we have a lot of industry consultants that work alongside us that kind of help position the AARP brand in the marketplace. And I feel that a lot of the classes at SILS have been very helpful in my career path. So glad to be here.
Thank you. Miranda.
Hello, my name is Miranda Kalbach. I graduated from SILS in 2016, and I started at Credit Suisse as a technical analyst, spent 5 years there, and then last December moved over to Ernst & Young, where I'm a technical consultant in their financial services org.
Thank you. So we're going to do the questions. There's not going to be a particular order. If everyone wants to answer, that would be great. If only one or two people have a response, that'll be fine too. But we'll just make this as conversational as possible. So to any of our panelists, what made you interested in consulting work? And as a follow-up to that, how did your strengths and interests align with what was needed to be successful as a consultant?
I can go first. So the reason I was interested in consulting is because throughout my undergrad career, I was a little unsure of where exactly I wanted to take my career. So I did stuff in computer science, a little bit in statistics. And when I heard about consulting and how folks are doing different projects, going from one thing to another, and never really doing the same thing all the time, I thought that's what like really caught my eye. And so I've been able to do that at Clarkston. So leveraging my background and then or leveraging my background in computer science, as well as like learning also the business aspect of consulting. I think the biggest thing that I realized from SILS was we can kind of hop in and out in any single conversation as long as we're good at problem solving as well as talking to people.
I would have to second that. I think that consulting gives you a lot of generalized knowledge, and it gives you the ability to go into different fields and really critically look at the information that's presented to you and come up with actionable insights to sort of drive that business or that specific revenue generator forward. And as long as you are a good problem solver and a good communicator, I think that consulting could be a really good fit for you.
So I started in the industry, as they say, and I wanted to have the opportunity to work on different projects and work with more than one client instead of just internal clients. And kind of expand my network. And so that was why I chose consulting. And then on top of that, working for a bank, you're not always using like the newest technologies. They're still running a lot of mainframes and things like that. When I started, I was told to learn Perl scripting. So I was excited to find a company where I could, utilize cloud and things like that, all sorts of different technologies in order to solve client problems. And I think part of my strengths with that are networking and then just like jumping in and figuring it out, kind of going for it, which is what you have to do a lot in a lot of SILS classes. You don't always completely understand the ask when you go into an assignment, but you kind of do your research and figure it out and work together. And that's kind of exactly what consulting is. So.
Great, thank you. So a lot of people are asking, how do you find out about different types of consulting roles or different types of organizations? So I think we have a good mix represented. So if you could talk about what kind of consulting company you're at and if you sought after that type of role or if it was just something that came to you and how that happened.
So Clarkston Consulting is a technology and implementation firm where we specialize in consumer products, life sciences, and retail. And it was really just kind of by chance that I came across Clarkston. Like someone posted on LinkedIn, I reached out to them and just had a conversation. And from that conversation, it seemed like people actually enjoyed their work. So I just kind of pursued Clarkston, but I was also just looking at consulting in general and different ways that I'd be able to leverage my background as like a little bit more tech heavy. And so just talking to people, I think is the best bet, is because you kind of understand what their day-to-day is like and what type of role they play in the organization.
So for me, I used a lot of Keen and Flagler's resources. They have a lot of different undergraduate clubs that can prepare you to understand the industry and the style of recruiting that each firm has. So in a lot of consulting interviews, you'll have to do like case preparation to be able to answer the questions or to be able to prove to the interviewers that you can answer questions in a way that they would want you to approach conversations with their clients. So the undergrad consulting club is like very helpful for catching students up to speed with those resources. And then there's Consult Your Community, 180 Degrees Consulting. Even my former club, the undergrad accounting club, sometimes touches a little bit on the big four. So like EY, KPMG, PwC, and Deloitte. And those also have really big consulting divisions. UNC has a lot of resources to prepare students for consulting. You just have to ask the right questions and look in the right places.
I'm going to be honest, I think I came at it from a different angle just because I did work in the industry and then went into consulting instead of the reverse. I was looking for a consulting job that was specifically in the financial services. I do regulatory reporting work. I was a systems analyst before that worked on like writing the requirements and the testing and things like that for the reporting engine for the firm. So I was looking for a way to work with more regulations, different technologies, things like that. And so I was looking at it more from not what type of consulting is it, but what industry and what can I bring to the table. And I kind of stumbled onto EY just through, I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what jobs or what their financial services org was until I applied.
Jamin, you mentioned about consulting interviews. Can you talk more specifically about how a consulting interview is made up and what things to prepare for a consulting interview?
So I think it really, like Miranda touched on, it would really depend on like what your entry point is and what skill set you have. So consulting, like doing internal consulting is different than consulting at like a strategy shop like McKinsey or BCG. Those interviews are really focused on like problem solving within the interview. They'll give you like a problem or a case. You have to walk the interview through how you're thinking through the problem. And it's just a way for them to compare you to other candidates on how quickly you can solve things and how resourceful you are and the way you communicate what you discovered. For me, I do internal consulting, and I got a lot of my background from doing internships in product development and innovation. So my background is not like as traditional as maybe students who would enter into, I would say like an EY or a KPMG.
I can tell you that for like fresh out of college, non-experienced people, they're looking for strong PowerPoint skills, strong presentation skills, a willingness to learn, and like a personality. And then for more experience, like when I went in, so I was experienced, they were looking more at like what kind of knowledge, because there are different, at least at EY, there are different like types of consulting, even within technology and even within their financial services org. So they're kind of looking for almost, I would explain it as like they're trying to collect cards or like marbles. They're trying to see like, okay, we have somebody who does this regulation and this regulation. What do you bring to the table that's unique, so that we can kind of slot you in and kind of, because a lot of consulting is about, here's the people that we have and the kind of work that we can do. And so if you bring something new to the table, then that's another layer of what they can offer to their clients. So I would say getting different experiences and things like that that other people don't have is also fundamental to being successful in the interviews.
And I want to echo off of that. Like, I'm one of the recruiting leads for Clarkston at Carolina. So I'm actually like doing these interviews for students. So the type of experiences, we're looking for diverse experiences that you could bring to consulting. And that's not necessarily stuff that like you've done an internship or like something like a project you coded. It's more like, are you involved as a leader in your community as well? And do you show initiative outside of what is just required of you?
Thank you. I think one of the reasons we were excited to offer a consulting panel at SILS, we've had 2 years of starting these SILS connections, and we're trying to do a whole range of different roles in information science and library science. And it's the first time we've had consulting. And I feel like every year there's a few people that are excitedly drawn to consulting, but then we also see alums who have been out a few years find their way into consulting roles. And it seems to be that it aligns with SILS personalities of our students. And so I would love to talk about your strengths and characteristics that you think help. Now, Miranda had mentioned the depth of the expertise in the industry, and I think that's a very valid point. But in terms of having a personality was already mentioned, but to me, to try to demystify the consulting world, what are some things that if you are drawn to this or you enjoy this, this would be a good role versus if you don't like this would probably not be a good fit for you?
I'm happy to start. So consulting, I can tell you, is not for you if you need structure. Like if you sometimes you go in and you have to pull, it's like pulling teeth out of the client to get what exactly it is that they want. And so you need to have critical thinking, but also a desire to think outside the box. Whereas in other roles that I've had, I've been given like a list of here's what you do. It's very clean cut and things like that. That's not consulting at all. There are longer hours. And then I would say like your problem solving and just like a willingness to work through things is huge. You don't have to necessarily have like all of the technical expertise, but you have to have the willingness to go and find the information and to figure it out. And then if you don't like PowerPoint, you should stay far away from consulting. I'm being serious. Like people have been rolled off of engagements because they couldn't do simple PowerPoint things. So like it's even like little details like formatting. Half of consulting is like the presentation of the information. In the industry, I was doing the same work, but I never had to do a PowerPoint because I didn't care how it looked. And now I'm seeing like, oh, when you put it in this way, it has more of an impact. So it's almost like the visualization aspect of it and the storytelling is hugely important.
Yeah, I would agree that storytelling and the way you present ideas is very important. I would say that you need to have a lot of creativity, and it also helps if you have a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to figure out what is needed and when it is needed. Because application and timing makes up for a lot of things, because each new problem and each new scenario that you're encountering can be different. And it's more of like, what can you do in the moment? What can you bring to the table in the moment? And if you, as long as you know how to bring value and you can go above and beyond and you can explain and articulate yourself clearly and how to get from one idea to the next and why you're trying to do that, then you've already done half the battle. So I think that's a lot of consulting without considering what specific knowledge you need for the industry.
I will say for me though, I actually I totally agree with like being able to tell a story and communicate it to others, but I've never had to work on a PowerPoint in the last 2 years. So it one thing that you'll hear in consulting is it depends. So there's so many different people that you're going to work with and so many different type of projects that you can work on. So like if you have a more technical role and you convey that that's something that you want to work in, you might be more like me and do something more tech heavy, but still working with other people and working with clients. And in that case, you wouldn't have to be presenting a PowerPoint, but you can still have to get your ideas across and communicate it well to others.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up, not on the PowerPoint point, but I wanted to follow up in terms of who the clients are. And so some of you mentioned they're internal or external. And how have you dealt with is it always that they are eager to have you as part of the team that's helping them? Or is it sometimes that they are told, here are, the consultant team to come in and fix things? And how does that interact with your day-to-day? Is part of the problem solving just figuring out who's the stakeholders on the team, or is it like everybody's excited to see you and you're just getting to work?
I wish it were that easy, that everyone was excited to see us, but yeah, there are definitely cases where a company, let's say one company that we work with is Pfizer. They are like, their leadership wants to work with us and we're doing something for them, but their regular employees don't care for change in the company. So a lot of what we do is implementations, and if we're implementing a new system, people who are used to the old system might or might not want that change. And so part of the challenge is, one, implementing that system, but also doing a little bit of organizational change management and training, and getting the whole business ready for the change that's coming up.
Yeah, I would say reception to change is very important. Some people aren't as willing to change or change how they do their work or how they approach things. So even if you bring new ideas or a new way of going about a process to someone, it's a lot of times it's about who the stakeholders are and at like what level in the company they're at. So like if people higher in the senior leadership want changes to happen, it's a lot easier for there to be a trickle down effect. So it's more about if that particular organization or that group or that team is receptive to the changes and has the ability to discern whether or not those changes would fit. Because at the end of the day, that team knows how it has operated in the past. And if they really want your help going forward, then they'll probably try to think critically about what it is that you're offering to them. And if they don't, I mean, it is what it is.
I've been on 2 engagements since I started, and neither client wanted us there. So, I mean, like, higher ups wanted us there, but then the people on the ground doing the work did not. And so it's very, very difficult. And you don't always get a lot done in the time frame. So, yeah, that's been my experience so far. I've heard that that's irregular, like the extent to which we're experiencing it on these engagements. But a lot of them, there's also a lot of fear because especially with like the banks and the insurance companies, my team is brought in to help with regulatory things. And so there's a lot of like, there's fines, there's stress, there's audits, both internal and external, and then the regulators coming after them. So everybody has an idea of how to do it. And so sometimes it feels like we're just hired to be extra hands. Like they already have the vision, they already have the solution, they're just bringing in extra people, but they're paying a lot of money to do that. So it's a lot of what you were saying. I think you said it earlier, Jamin, about emotional intelligence. You have to like read the room virtually a lot of times to understand like where the hostility is coming from. It's usually not at you, it's usually at like the situation. So
Thank you. Several of you mentioned about SILS classes preparing you for this type of work. And so I wanted to ask if there were any particular SILS classes that helped you build your consulting strengths, and if so, what are they?
you're having me go back in time, aren't you? The organizational one with Dr. Drahi I still use that. And then the SQL classes I took beyond just the intro to databases. That's also been helpful. And then I think there was one, was her name Dr. Murillo? It was about like health information and like the visualization and everything like that. That really drove home like how people gather information differently, and so that's helped as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the SQL class. I use SQL almost every day on my current project. So that was super helpful. And then I forget the names of the classes, but 382 and 582, where we did projects in teams, kind of like where we were implementing something. And I found that most translatable to what I actually do as a consultant.
Yeah, I agree. 382 was, I would say, was probably one of the most applicable courses that I took at SILS. I took it with Professor Urquhart, and he was, the way he teaches his class is pretty amazing. And the way that he gets people to work together and the way that he sort of separates ideas that he wants to go forward, I think is really helpful for giving people a taste of how work is done in the real world. And I would encourage you all to at least like look him up or have a conversation with him or ask one of your friends about his class and see if that would be something you would be interested in.
Thank you. I wanted to, before I ask the last question, I wanted to sneak in a question about traditionally consulting was very travel based, and then there was a global pandemic. And so I wanted to ask what your travel schedule looks like now, and if that is going to shift in the future.
Yeah, when I joined on the premise of traveling Monday through Thursday. And then I graduated in the middle of the pandemic. So when we started remotely. And in the last couple of months, there are some people who have started to travel. And I know people who travel now Monday through Thursday every week. Me personally, like the only 2 times I've traveled are for company meetings where our whole company is traveling to one location. So yeah, no travel for me. I'm just working remote.
So I guess it would be a little different for me since I just recently moved to DC. And so far, the only time I've traveled is to this health club that was in Ashburn, Virginia. Like that is the only time that I traveled. It was a fun experience. I might actually be going back there to do some consumer interviewing, but so far it's been Tuesday through Thursday in the office and then Mondays and Fridays remote.
My first engagement, I did not travel at all. This engagement, I've traveled to Charlotte once and New York once, and then there's talk of more travel to New York, but it's as the client requires or requests. It's not, I hear the glory days of Monday through Thursday and then things like that, but we haven't been doing that, at least at my level. As you get higher up in the company and you're more on like the bringing in the client side, instead of actually doing the work once you win the engagement, my managers are traveling every week. So I think it just depends.
Thank you. And so my last pre-question before we open it up to see if there are any additional audience questions is, what recommendations would you give to someone considering consulting as a career?
My recommendation, if you're considering consulting, is try to talk to as many different people from different firms, because consulting, like in it, is a very broad term. So what one person might be doing is going to be completely different from another person in a different company. So talk to people and see where your interests are and whether or not they align with what with different companies are doing.
I would say consider your personality, and when you're going through your interviews, treat it as a way to interview the firm. The goal is to be competitive enough so that you have a choice and so that you don't have to go, or so that you can go with the firm of your preferred choice or in your preferred location. So I would say like just work hard now so you can give yourself more options when you're recruiting. And if there's the more competitive you are, the more you'll align with what company you pick. And that will likely increase your happiness when you start working full time. So I would just consider, your mental health, consider your happiness, consider your location, and consider the people and their personalities, and if you would like to work for them as well.
And I would honestly say that if you're going through interviews and it's just not clicking or things like that, I found a lot of value going into the industry first and then going to consulting, because then you get to see both sides of it and you kind of bring a different picture. So, it's kind of like, I think of it as going straight into your MBA versus working for a while and then going for an executive MBA, things like that. Like there's not just one path to consulting. So it's okay if you take like a meandering path. There's value in that as well. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I want to give a quick story about that. So when I was a senior interviewing with Clarkston, one of my really good friends, he was also interviewing with Clarkston at the time, and it didn't work out for him to start working at that time. But now, 2 years later, I've actually referred him and brought him to our company, and he's starting next week. So there's definitely a lot of ways that if you're interested in consulting, that you can get into it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. You hate to feel like, oh, if you didn't think of it right as soon as you graduated, then it's not an option for you. So we like to hear those different path stories so that students don't feel that there's only one path. So a couple things before we open it up to the audience. Number one, panelists, would you be comfortable if people viewing this video wanted to have some contact information? And if so, if you could drop your email in the chat or LinkedIn, whichever way you'd prefer. And don't feel like you have to, but I just don't want to offer that connection without asking first. So that's number one. Number two, I'm going to stop recording because over the lifetime of the pandemic, we have learned that potentially people will ask more questions if it's not recorded for forever. And so we're going to stop the recording.